Hey there, from the KUOW newsroom, this is Seattle Now. I'm Patricia Murphy with a roundup of today's top stories. No fooling today, we've got some news. It's Wednesday, April 1st. The Seattle City Council has passed new limits on data collection from automated license plate readers and surveillance cameras used by the Seattle Police Department.
I hope we can all agree that we do not want data that is collected through ALPR to be used against our residents for immigration action, reproductive health care, or gender-affirming care.
That's Seattle City Council member Alexis Mercedes Rink during yesterday's vote. SPD will now be required to pause all data collection from cameras and license plate readers for 60 days if the city receives a warrant to share that data with civil immigration enforcement. The pause could also be enacted if the mayor and police chief determine the data is being used to track individuals seeking reproductive or gender-affirming care. King County Executive Gurmai Zahalai has issued an executive order to open 500 new shelter units in 500 days. The order directs the county to improve how housing and health services communicate with legal systems. He says 500 units is not the final goal, but his order represents an urgent effort to break the links between homelessness, addiction, and incarceration. Governor Bob Ferguson has put his signature on updates to the state's capital budget. It pays for construction projects like school buildings. The revisions include more than $200 million for affordable housing across the state. At today's signing in Olympia, Ferguson highlighted a few of the places the money will be spent.
It includes $123 million in additional funding to the Housing Trust Fund, which helps build or preserve approximately 3,000 units of housing. The increase to the Housing Trust Fund includes $45 million to preserve and repair affordable housing. This funding can be used as well for flood-damaged homes.
At today's signing, the governor praised the legislature for coming up with the funds to make up for a $1 billion shortfall and federal cuts to food assistance and health care. The Washington State Attorney General was keeping a close eye on today's legal fight before the U.S. Supreme Court to end birthright citizenship. Nick Brown led the first legal challenges against President Trump's executive order to deny citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants. A federal judge in Washington state ruled last year that the order was unconstitutional. Several other judges agreed, but the Trump administration appealed the rulings, and the case was before the high court today. A ruling is expected this summer. The U.S. Forest Service is shutting down several research stations in the Pacific Northwest as part of a national reorganization. Research facilities in Seattle, Portland, and Wenatchee are closing, while stations in Olympia, Corvallis, and La Grande are set to remain. The Forest Service is also preparing to move its headquarters from Washington, D.C. to Salt Lake City. This session, State Representative Deborah Lacanoff got one of 6 bills passed that she put forward related to tribal sovereignty and treaty rights. The Democrat from Anacortes says she'll keep pressing on. More now from KNKX environment reporter Bellamy Palethorpe.
Lacanoff says the measure that passed will wipe state statutes clean of an unenforceable voter initiative from 1984. It sought to block tribal fishing rights after the Bolt decision. She says this one victory might seem small, but it represents progress.
I knew some of them were the beginning of a conversation that allowed me to lean into leadership to say these are priority areas where we can help.
Lacanoff is an Alaska native. She's especially excited about the measures she put forward related to fishing rights and salmon, which she calls the essence of Washingtonians and of our tribes.
If you have a healthy salmon, you have a healthy environment, cool and clean water, healthy ecosystems, strong social structures, incredible strength in the economy.
One of her biggest priorities next session will be the creation of a statewide salmon commission. I'm Bellamy Palethorpe reporting.
Another tech company is laying off hundreds of workers in the Seattle area. This time it's Oracle. The information technology company plans to lay off nearly 500 workers by June 1st. Business Insider says the layoffs are part of a larger effort to spend more on AI and help the company's falling stock prices. Yesterday's announcement came on the same day that Meta announced it was laying off 168 workers in Seattle, Bellevue, and Redmond. The president of FIFA says Iran will play in the World Cup match set for June 26th in Seattle. Gianni Infantino says he's spoken with Iranian coaches and players and told the French news agency AFP yesterday the Seattle match and 2 others in Los Angeles will go on as scheduled. The Iranian sports minister announced last week he was negotiating with FIFA to move the Iranian World Cup matches from the U.S. to Mexico. The June 26 match between Iran and Egypt already stirred up controversy because it was billed as a pride match. Local World Cup organizers gave it that designation because the match coincides with Seattle's pride celebrations. But both Iran and Egypt filed a formal complaint with FIFA. Washington state is still facing a bit of a conundrum on the open water. A tool to reduce air pollution from ships might actually produce more water pollution, swapping one harm for another. A proposal to untangle this paradox went aground this winter in the state legislature for the second year in a row. Journalist Tom Bonsi wrote about it for the Salish Current and talked with our very own Paige Browning.
Hey, Tom, thanks for being on.
Glad to be with you.
You have reported the issue is something called exhaust scrubbers. They're used to basically power wash the smokestacks on big ships so they put out less nasty air pollution. But you're reporting that this is backfiring. Can you explain what's going on?
That's right. Yeah, it is kind of a conundrum. Ships basically nowadays, under international maritime rules, have 2 options for how to reduce their air pollution. One is just to switch to a premium, more expensive but cleaner burning fuel, or to, exactly as you were saying, to use the scrubbers. And the problem with the scrubbers is then you get this acidic, toxic wastewater that has to go somewhere, and commonly it's just flushed overboard. So what the legislature, at the prodding of the environmental community locally, is thinking of doing is just take away the scrubber option, make everyone use the cleaner burning but more expensive premium fuel.
Why has this failed so far?
It didn't even get out of port, if you will, at the legislature. It didn't come to a vote. And there was support, but there was 2 big problems. One is the Port Association and shippers in our state are not convinced yet this taking away the scrubber option for air compliance is a good idea, and they were vigorously opposed. And secondly, the state would then need to set up a new regulatory division in the State Department of Ecology. And there the problem was that would be a multi-million-dollar cost. And the state's budget writers, who are not on board as sponsors with Lukanov, put down their foot at the beginning of the sessions. There's a deficit in the budget, and they just would not consider anything that increased state spending on a new program. So it was a non-starter.
So no movement in the legislature yet. Can you tell us more about what port representatives and the shipping industry is saying?
Yeah, they were concerned that the state would make its ports less competitive for minimal benefit. And so the issue, particularly from the shipping industry, is they are unconvinced that these wastewater discharges of the scrubber leftovers are really causing that much harm. Now, the environmental community says they have lots of studies that show, particularly in lab studies, that this stuff is harmful to the environment. There was one study, though, a real-world study in Washington state on cruise lines where the researchers took water out of the scrubber discharge, and after figuring out how much dilution happens, which is quite a lot quite quickly in a big water like Puget Sound, that the harm was, quote, minimal to the environment. So that caused people to pause about increasing the costs on the shipping industry for what was perceived to be potentially a minimal benefit to the environment.
And as you've reported, our Pacific Ocean neighbors in California, Oregon, Alaska, and Canada all have a stake in this issue. How is Canada approaching it so far?
Yeah, what gets dumped in the water in Canada doesn't stay in Canada
Right.
and vice versa. So this is definitely a transboundary issue. The same lineup of interests, so ports, environmentalists, shipping lines, also squaring off in British Columbia. The one difference is that there's not really a role for the province as there is for the state on our side of the border. So it's all Transport Canada's bailiwick. They have announced a year ago that they would ban scrubber wastewater discharge in the southern resident killer whale habitat, which is conveniently for us on this side of the border, almost all the water on the Canadian side of the line that we share in the Salish Sea. But there is no implementation timeline at this point. So more consultation is happening across the border, as will be happening this summer here. And at some point, probably, this will be resolved with the same answer, but I'm not holding my breath.
Okay. Well, we'll follow up with you. Semi-retired journalist Tom Bonsi published his story in the Salish Current, and you'll find a link on our website. Tom, thank you so much for your reporting and your time today.
You're welcome.
That's all for today from the KUOW newsroom in Seattle. Our producer is Andy Hurst. I'm Patricia Murphy. The interview in today's episode was produced by John O'Brien. Seattle Now and KUOW are members of the NPR network. See ya.